Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results. Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast, and a very special welcome to a gentleman who is sitting right now in Toronto, Canada. He's working, he's told me he's already had a bit of a snooze, which actually is not true. He just wanted to say that to see how I would react. Mr. Steven Rosen, welcome to the podcast. Absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Darren. I'm so glad to be here, and it's amazing. Not that I should be amazed how technology works, that we're on either ends of the world, and I see you clearly, I hear you clearly, and I'm looking one day to be invited out to Australia and see the beautiful country that it is.
Well, it actually is a beautiful country, and many people say that it's very similar. Not so much the environment, but the people very similar to Canada. So
Good people, then.
absolutely,
Caring people. Nice.
totally,
Well, we're all
totally.
part of the Commonwealth, I guess.
We are, and we both measure things in centimeters and millimeters and
Well, we
Celsius.
eventually got there, you know.
We did. We did. I was just saying before we press record, Stephen, I just wanted to, for the benefit of the listeners, just read a little bit about you. So I think it sets the context. You're a sales leadership advisor and an executive coach. You work with CROs and VPs of sales to strengthen leadership discipline and execution consistency. You've been in business for more than 30 years around sales leadership, and you focus on one principle, and that is performance does not break because people stop caring. It breaks when standards stop holding. Really interesting concept we're going to talk about. And you work with executive teams to install a coaching infrastructure. And I know we just spoke about coaching before we press record.
Yes.
Enforcing leadership standards and protecting forecast integrity, particularly under pressure. And you've just released a book called Focused, which is a leadership discipline that protects performance from distraction. And interestingly, I want to get into your background in a second.
Okay,
Interestingly, you
yeah.
said it's not really a book, it's more of an operating manual. So I'm interested to get into that as well.
Okay.
Before we do, though, can you just give us a
Yes.
little bit of the background in terms of where it started for you and what has led you to focus your attention on executive coaching and working with sales leaders, particularly the CROs and VPs of sales?
Okay, I'm going to go a little bit. I'm going to go back and just give some context because I never wanted to go into sales. To
Hmm.
be honest with you, I never used to tell people this, but I was a finance guy. I studied in finance, and I had moved from Montreal to Toronto. I mean, going way back, and got a job in sales, selling to pharmacies, over-the-counter products. And I did quite well at it. And the second year, I think I won Sales Rep of the Year. And within 7 years, I had seven different roles with the organization and ended up running three divisions.
Hmm.
I was kind of a go-to guy at the time, never trained, but thrown into positions. And then I left for a company that we were in the midst of the dot-com era, and this was kind of, I thought, the dot-com of pharma. And I went there and had a tremendous 3 years. I tripled sales. My team tripled sales over the 3 years, but it came at an expense, and the expense was my mental health. Even though we
Right.
promoted products for depression, I was ended up taking those products to basically keep myself afloat, and realized that's not a life for me.
Yeah.
And I left corporate life and started my own business, helping sales leaders who were in situations like myself, under constant pressure, trying to survive the corporate world. And I guess over time, I had a coach who'd say the market will tell you what they're willing to pay for. And coaching became a very interesting endeavor, working with people one on one. And that's what I enjoy the most, impacting sales leaders who can impact their sales teams. So
Yeah.
I've been at this in terms of my own business for 22 years, or maybe it's 23 now. I think it started in
Yeah.
March of 2003, I think. and I love it. And this is my office for the last 22 years. I've worked with Skype before people, even talk Skype or wanted to talk on Skype. And I really, this is what I love. I have some proprietary stuff that I've developed over time, and I'm not plugging anything, but my coaching course is called Focus Sales Coaching, and I've always been a believer in focus as an approach to success.
Mm. I love that, and it's interesting that you talk about coaching. You've focused on coaching because I know, and I've got some colleagues that are also connected to Mike Weinberg, who was the writing of your forward for the book, and I know you've had a conversation with him on his podcast recently. That believe that coaching, particularly in sales, is the number one driver of high performance, but it's also the first thing that either gets either rescheduled or put to the side because
You
often you
got it.
can't see the immediate tangible return on investment or time on that. So it's something that we know that works and we need to have patience. And you just said before we press record, writing a book is not an easy process and it does require
Mm,
time, it does require effort, it does require commitment, and it does require patience as well,
yeah.
which is very similar to coaching.
It's funny that you mentioned that because my wife thinks I'm the least patient person in the world, and and I probably am. So getting to publishing has been quite the endeavor. Or how come this is not ready? Because I was relying on other people, and so patience has been a test for me. My wife has the patience of Job, I think, is what the Bible describes it as. I'm completely opposite, but
Completely opposite.
coaching
Um,
does take patience, and it takes longer to impact the business, but the long-term impact is felt in sales. Where if
mm,
you're solving issues, I call it rescuing in the book,
yeah.
rescuing deals. If you're constantly rescuing, the reps don't learn,
Mm.
right? You're doing the job for them, and most sales managers have been great reps. They've been promoted because they're great reps, and they want nothing more than to close deals, to be the star, and do anything but their job. No, but
Yeah.
to do what they're best at, which is closing, helping out
Mm.
on deals. But what I try to make the point is, it's not your job to do that anymore.
Yes. And
So
it's fascinating. And as you mentioned that, I'm thinking most sales leaders, and certainly in my experience, most sales leaders have chosen. Well, they haven't necessarily chosen to become a sales leader. They were anointed as a sales leader because, as you
true,
said, they were a great sales person, and they're not necessarily given the transition plan to actually make that a seamless transition because all of a sudden they've gone from being responsible for their own numbers, leading the deal, getting the deal done, getting all the accolades that come with that, to all of a sudden now being responsible for maybe five, six, 10, depending on the size of the team,
correct.
where they have to take on a completely different role. And for many of them, it's a complete culture shock because no longer are they the front of the deal. They want to be front of the deal. And that's where they come in and potentially rescue the deal and
Hmm.
disintermediate their sales team and their salespeople in the process. Which is, as you said, that's not their role, and it has to change. Um, One of the questions I wanted to ask you, Stephen, is
Yes.
in your career, certainly from the coaching, have you seen, particularly in the sales business world, coaching change or the appetite for coaching change over the last 22 years?
It's an interesting question that you asked because when I became a manager, a regional sales manager, I coached. I wasn't the best of coaches. I wasn't really trained in coaching, but I was out with my reps on a consistent basis.
Mm,
And I know through COVID, people stopped going out, and even companies says, "Well, don't coach anymore because we want our reps not to be, we want them to be relaxed." So I think what's changed is many sales reps through COVID have not been coached. They
mm,
become sales managers because if they're in a SaaS business, it's growing. You're a good rep. Let's make you a manager, or you'd like to be a manager. So coaching, especially with so a couple thoughts here. One is with CRMs and stacks of apps that managers have. They tend to coach from behind the desk.
mm,
And so as coaching changed, I think it's gotten worse, to be honest with you. What's happened to the days where the manager's role was getting out and coaching?
mm,
So even managers I've worked with, especially in SaaS companies who are new, um, they haven't been coached themselves, but they've been good reps. The other thing um, is reliance on coaching behind the desk, as I said. And one of the things that I talk about pressure. One of the pressures that managers face is what I call a leadership issue,
Mm.
is they're not rewarded for coaching. What they're rewarded for is, are you busy? Oh yeah. And how many managers I've coached, I'm too busy to coach.
Yes.
They're rewarded for being available. Their boss calls them, okay, I'll get you a response in 2 minutes, in whatever, in 20 minutes. So they're constantly disrupted from doing what they can leverage, or their multiplier effect, which is coaching.
Mm.
So what I've realized is the system doesn't help them very much. One, they don't train them, but even if they train them, they reward being busy, being responsive, jumping in, helping the reps, as opposed to rewarding coaching and development. And most of the coaching I see is coaching the deal.
Yes.
And I call that performance management. Maybe that's just my own thing, but coaching skills
Mm.
to get the deal is really where the manager can leverage the impact on sales reps. And, so what they consider coaching and what I try to train as coaching, sometimes they're in two different worlds, even at senior level, coach the deal.
And does that create a bit of a disconnect or a challenge for you, knowing the discipline of what drives sustainable performance and behavior, and the perception that the senior VPs may have in terms of what coaching might be, and their focus is on the deal
Yeah.
because they're thinking about, well, we've got to get a number, we've got to hit our quota, because if we don't hit our quota, we're all sorts of trouble,
Yeah.
which creates the pressure. And so coaching then becomes more deal focused, not behavior focused, because that potentially has a longer cycle to get to the outcomes.
That's part of the problem that we're dealing with, to be honest
Yeah.
with you. And it's not because people are bad or because they lack talent. Usually, when sales are not coming in, we think, hey, it's an effort issue. The sales reps are not putting in the effort, or we think, oh, we don't have the talent in the sales organization. I come back and say, these are quality people. Your managers are quality people.
Yeah.
But what you do is create a system that points them in a direction that's not going to create long-term success. The
Mm.
pressure is the quarter.
Yeah.
How many times I'm coaching folks and I say, okay, we coach on a regular basis. So what's the plan for this month? Well, it's March. We're ending a quarter. We can't coach this month.
Mm.
We're not going to be out in the field. We're going to be closing deals. We're going to be doing deal inspection. So, coaching is important. There's other key components because I talk about, I don't want to jump around, but the three
Yeah.
things, I've always lived by the three things, which I talk about in my book. And you can't do too many things well.
Yeah.
But if
But
you
you got to
pick
be,
three,
yeah.
three's a good number.
Yeah. And three is something that it's actually manageable. But
Yes.
also three is a magic number where people start to retain information.
Yeah, right. They remember what the three things are. And I think I've always felt that you're better to do three things extremely well
Mm.
than to do 10 things and do them half-assed,
Yeah. So
and yes.
to start, because I want to talk about the specifics of the book. When you're talking to senior executives at organizations where they bring you in, do they bring you in because they recognize they've got a revenue problem? Or so do you come in, and the reason I'm asking that question, it's almost like when you're selling, you sell what the organization or the customer wants, but what you're really selling is what they need. So, is there a common theme whereby people bring you in to be their coach or the sales leaders that is slightly different to what you end up delivering to the sales leaders that almost becomes to the VPs and the CROs? Oh my God, if only I'd have known this, I would have done this 10 years earlier.
Well, the challenge that yes, yes, that's a big challenge, to be honest with you. And Focused was written, as much as it's a manager book, it's really written for the CROs and the VPs of sales that are far removed. And they're missing the boat because they're under pressure. They don't see the day to day. Usually in large companies, it's the second line level of leadership
Mm,
that is totally, I don't want to say out to lunch, but they're not attuned with coaching either. Because those are the folks who enforce, right? So you have your sales managers who are trying their hardest,
yeah.
they're juggling, 200 balls in the air. And then the second line is like, okay, tell me what's happening with this deal because my boss wants to know. And they're not reinforcing or enforcing what really needs to happen. And I think that, there's a disconnect there. And really, to me, the starting point is managers want to be good coaches.
Mm.
In many cases, that they love to be, but the biggest issue they say is time. And it's not a time issue. It's a priorities issue.
That's what I was going to say because those middle executives, those senior executives, what they're probably focused on is the tangible. Give me the forecast, give me the close rate, give me
Yeah.
the conversions. Don't give me the motherhood statements or the coaching behavior sort of stuff. I need to deliver tangible results, and hence the pressure comes down. And when
Yeah,
the pressure comes
100%.
down, guess what? Things like coaching, and this is why that they always the research suggests that such as what you said, we can't do coaching in March because we've got to hit a quota. So it's all hands to the pump. So
Yeah.
they get disenfranchised, they get removed, they get we're going to do other things. We're going to do deal inspections. We're not going to do coaching. We're going to use
And
coaching for when we've got a breathing space.
yes, and the one of the big lines in my book is if it doesn't happen under pressure, it's not truly a priority.
Yeah, yeah.
I phrase it differently, but the bottom line is when the pressure hits, what do you do?
Mm,
We've all seen the data. I've seen the data for 20 years since I started my business that coaching drives performance.
yeah,
There's tangible data on that, and it continues, whether it's 20%, 15, 25%, that highly effective coaches can impact the sales of their team. That's
yeah.
quite the multiplier.
It
I
is.
mean, I used to go out and ask if you can grow your business by 20% this year just by improving your sales manager's effectiveness, wouldn't that be phenomenal?
Mm,
And what I'll do is I'll help you. I'll coach them to be better coaches. But what I've realized the missing ingredient, you want the reinforcement, but you also want the enforcement.
yeah.
That's that the next level is saying, hey, I'm doing a debrief with you or a one-on-one, and tell me about the week. How many people did you coach? How many
Mm,
times were you out in the field? Darren, I think I'm a little bit older than you, but in my days when I was VP of sales, my managers had three things that they had to work on. I know it's hard to believe. One was coaching.
yeah.
And I can remember the number, and they used to be hard on me, 150 days a year in the field.
Okay.
That's 50% of their time.
Yeah.
That's not easy to do. So you
Yeah.
asked me if coaching has changed. When I'm working with people, the companies are paying me, a good sum of money to help their managers. And I say, okay, how often are you out in the field? Well, I didn't go out last week. This is a reality.
Yeah.
And I sit there and I want to help. Well, my whole intent is to help. Part of what I enjoy doing is making an impact on the organization.
Mm,
But if they're not doing it, I can't do it for them. I can teach them how to do it. I can debrief with them, but it's not happening. Just it's a while ago, but every month I would publish how many days each manager was out in the field to the general manager of the company,
yeah.
and I would live and die by that.
Yeah.
That was one of my three things, and that was number one. So, to be honest, has coaching changed? That's the best question I've been asked. Yes, it has changed. It seems to
Yeah.
be less important.
And it's I don't do you know I don't know whether it's because it's less tangible, it's just or it's difficult. I remember I was in corporate many years ago and one particular year we had the year of the coach. And the
Yes.
the the deal was we wanted all of the sales leaders around the country
Yeah.
to coach their teams, right? Now, we brought in an organization to help with the training and the coaching and the education around what coaching is versus what it isn't. But I must say, the resistance that was put up by I'll say most of the sales
Yes.
leaders in that organization was extraordinary. Now I
Yes.
embraced it because I'd started a coaching diploma and I just was eating it up and just thought this is the best thing since sliced bread because I could see a real
Yes.
enablement opportunity here. But I'll never forget at the end of the year we were sitting at the sales kickoff and I overheard two sales leaders from a different state or a different province. And they were saying, thank God the year of the coach is over because now we can get back to doing what we're good at, and that is getting the numbers.
You know what? It's interesting. Let me ask you a question. And there's something many companies I work with, the managers say reps don't do a good job prospecting. They're not spending enough time prospecting. And I wrote a couple articles on why reps hate prospecting.
Yeah.
And then it dawned on me that prospecting is the reps coaching. That reps hate prospecting because it's hard. Many sales managers hate coaching
Yes.
because it's hard.
Yes.
And sometimes the reps are resistant,
Mm.
right? But the fact is, I don't know if you have there's a cough medicine in Canada called Buckley's, and Buckley's tastes terrible, but it works. And that's coaching. So if you're good at it, it's great because it's fun. When I became a VP, I used to say, can someone bring in pictures of customers so I know what they look like? We can put
Mm.
them up on the wall in our boardroom. Because the thing I like the most is interacting with customers because I learned a lot.
Yes.
When you get more senior, you're removed from that. But I shake my head because the secret to success for managers is clearly there.
Mm.
How to get there, there's a lot of potholes when you get calls because it's uncomfortable. You have to say no to your manager when they call you, what's happening with this deal? Well, why don't we go back? Why don't we plan this on a regular scheduled time on Friday and I'll give you
Mm.
the information as opposed to I'm dropping my coaching session with Steven because my boss is now nervous.
Yes. And
And,
that's
and
where the
that's the
pressure
first,
comes, right?
yes, and that's reality. So it's not that
Mm.
that managers are bad. I think they're good intentioned, but
Yeah,
they
but
have to say no, and they have to feel comfortable saying no to things that are not in their top list, things that are going to multiply their business.
and that's the thing when you talk about there are three things that any leader should be really focused on. If you ask most leaders, they'll have a list that's probably got 30 things on it, right? And that's why they're
Yes.
so busy and they're always in this constant feeling of pressure and some would say then anxiety, uncertainty. It's not a great place to work in because then if a manager is under pressure, if the manager is not being coached, if the manager is simply being dictated by the senior people who are wanting numbers and forecasts and updates and stuff like that, then that flows down. And so the team then becomes a reflection of the leader. So it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It is. It's a bad. It's like a treadmill, right? That
Yeah.
you're running harder, but you're not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
And it's very insightful.
And so you wrote the book Focus. I'm curious to know, was there I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but is it like your life's work that you've just found all the stuff I've been doing over the last 20 plus years and my experience as VP, I've got to put this on, on paper. Is that how
Well,
it came, or is it something else?
I joke that it's been 22 years in the making.
Okay.
And that's how long I've been in my business. Because when I first started my own business, it was like, okay, it's focus. And if I go back on my blog, I think I still have those articles up where I
Yeah.
talked about focus. And then, I started getting into the coaching component, and coaching is key. Coaching is the number one factor that drives sales rep performance. And then when I'm working with companies, I kind of think, why is this not like I've had companies come to me because they've implemented global coaching programs and
Mm-hmm.
they haven't had traction.
Yeah.
And I've given them the holy grail, which is your next level has to support it.
Yeah.
And then I go away in other companies I work with. But what I've seen which resonated because there's lots of components that have come sort of built to get here. And then all of a sudden I got inspired. I don't know why, but thought, oh, maybe I have the answer to what I'm seeing because I see it constantly. Is that companies, I worked with one organization and the senior leader said, hey, whatever we've done with Steven, we're going to implement. He stood up there in the training and said,
Yep.
we're going to implement this. Now, what we realized is they're doing too much minutia. I use a different word, but uh, I think it's okay to say caca. But
Yeah.
the managers were busy doing a lot of minutia. So they said, we love what Stephen taught us because we got into three things: coaching,
Yep.
performance management, which was the accountability sessions we did,
Yep.
and execution. And it's like, oh, we love this stuff, but we don't have time to do it.
Mm.
So what I realized is they're not lying, but we need to take stuff off their plate. So I said, let's create a task force. I feel like I'm in government. Let's create a task force to get some of this stuff off your plate so you can do some of the stuff that's going to help you multiply your impact. And we created a task force, and I coached the person doing the task force, and we eliminated. There were certain things. One thing that sticks out of my mind: if there was a return to do, like they had to return product,
Yep.
anything over $500, the manager had to approve.
Okay.
So I don't know. Is that a good use of their time? I said, is there any time you said, no, we're not returning it? No. So can't we give the reps a greater limit
Mm.
and take that off your plate? So there's so many little things that build and build and build, and then all of a sudden there's no time to do the stuff that you've been taught that you want to do, unless we remove that from your plate. And
Mm.
that's where I look and think, okay, you know, if a manager reads this and they're able to make the impact that they want to make by saying, hey, I'm not getting to this, and no, but the real impact is the CRO saying, hey, this is the direction we're going. Same as if they're implementing a selling skills methodology.
Yeah.
And if they don't say and put, this is where we're going, and our expectation is that you use this every time you make a call, and that the managers are going to coach you on this.
Mm.
And we're going to check both of you to inspect to enforce that both things are happening.
Mm.
It doesn't gain traction. It may gain some traction, but if you want to change your organization, you want to impact it. And one of the things I talk about, what I realize is whether we're talking about execution, accountability, effort, time spent on coaching, these things don't just explode. The line I use, I'm trying to look for it. Uh, Execution doesn't just drop, it slowly leaks.
Mm.
So you're too busy to see where the misses are
Yeah.
because they're not, like you dropped 10 accounts
Mm.
because the manager wasn't coaching. Maybe you dropped one and that's kind of normal rhythm of your business. But all these things are happening slowly. So, your CRM doesn't pick them up.
No.
Your 200 dashboards that you get don't pick them up. So it's a slow process of when you're not following standards, when you're not coaching, when you're not inspecting, performance slowly drops off,
Yeah.
and it may not be visible.
And then you look back at some point in time and it compounds over time. You think, my goodness, how did we get here?
Well, I used to have a boss, and he used to say, good years are not terrible. Sorry, bad years are not terrible because sometimes it makes you look deeper into what the
Yes.
problems are.
Yeah.
I remember him. You used to, not that I have very many bad years, but you do have a few.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it does force you to look, but you don't want to be looking after the fact,
No.
right? You
No.
you,
You want
you
to be
want to say,
proactive and
hey, most VPs or CROs, you say, does coaching drive performance?
mm.
What do they say?
Well, they'll probably say yes, but
Absolutely.
the question is, are they committed to it? Which
Yeah,
is a
right.
different.
Is it happening? How do
Well,
you how do you know it's happening?
well, it's almost like, and a lot of them will turn around and say, "Well, it's a nice to have." We know it. We know it's going to drive performance, but there are other things that are taking priority. And you said it before. It's not the fact that people don't have the time to do it; they're just not prioritizing it.
No.
So if you can remove all the stuff that is not driving the performance that you say you want, and focus on the things that are, then you can start to be inspecting those sort of things, and you'll start to see that uplift. And it will take time. But the other thing is you've got to be patient and you've got to be committed to the journey.
Yeah, it's interesting. You when we were chatting, you used the word patience, and it's not in my vocabulary.
Yeah,
But but one of the words that I use to describe it, which I think is similar, I was thinking as you were talking, is discipline. You
yeah,
need to have the discipline as a sales organization.
mm,
And that's why I call it not, it's like if you're going to read my book, not that you're not going to be motivated.
mm,
You're going to be getting a slap in the head saying, this is what you do. Now I'm explaining it. It's not pleasant and it's uncomfortable to realize that, but it explains what you're going through and you
yeah,
can change it
yeah.
by being more disciplined.
Well, and that's the thing because I mean, Jim Rohn said discipline weighs ounces, but regret weighs tons.
That's a good one. I got to listen to the recording. I like that one.
Um, now in the book you talk about, and the book is called Focused, a leadership discipline for sales managers under pressure, and the key thing
Ah,
is under pressure.
yeah.
Um, within the book, you talk about the leadership enforcement spine, a framework for protecting coaching, inspection, and standards when the pressure tests leadership consistency. Can you talk a little bit about this concept of the leadership enforcement spine? I like the wordage. All right.
Yeah.
I'd love you to explain it because it I'm liking, well, it might be aspirational, but it might be a bit of a slap in the face as well for people.
Okay. I think it's realistic. I think if I were to put it in very simple terms, I talk about the three things.
Yep.
And I always work that way. I swear, people who've worked with me for years, I always say, what are the three things you need to do to be successful?
Mm-hmm.
For managers, my belief is, and it could differ by organization, is one is coaching,
Yep.
two is holding regular, systematic accountability meetings, and three is executing with excellence, which means whatever you're working on that you're making sure is happening. And
Yep.
that's a discipline as well. So the leadership spine really talks about we want to make sure you're focused on the three things that are critical, which requires the next level of leadership to inspect that, to make sure that you're following through on those things. So I gave you the example that my managers was 150 days a year in the field, which was actually 20 days. Was it 20 days a month? Yeah, pretty close to 20 days. 20, yeah. No, that's not, sorry, 10 days a month. I
Yep.
forgot. So who's inspecting that? Who's making sure that's happening? And that's really where the leadership spine comes in, is protecting those three things that your organization has deemed incredibly important for performance
Mm.
and having conversations. So the conversation right now is tell me about the Rosen account. How's that going? Are we going to get the business? Who are the competitors? How that changes is tell me who you've coached this week.
Mm-hmm.
What are you working on with them? Because my belief is coaching is about focus, which means you work on one, maybe two things with each of your reps until they master a specific skill that they're working on.
Yep.
Have you inspected their KPIs? Have you inspected their deals? Because some of the problems with deal inspection happen and creates unpredictability because the rep will give you an answer. And if you don't dig deeper, not to say they're bullshitting you, but they may not have the answers. And the
Yep.
key is really helping them think through.
Mm.
So if the next level isn't doing that, the spine breaks.
Yep.
And then CRO should be inspecting the second line. Are you having what kind of conversations are you having with your managers?
Yep.
So it's an organization that sort of aligns along your three things. I think it's a good way to explain it.
And the three things that the organization comes up with that they believe will lead to sustainable success. The
You got
three
it.
the three key drivers. So
You
it's
got
not
it.
you coming in with the magic wand and saying, here are the three things you need to do, and you're going to have
I
miraculous
do believe
outcomes.
those are the three things. I've spent more time thinking about this than most people in the world, I think. What are the three things that are going to make a difference? It's nice that some of my colleagues agree with those three things. I'm not saying it's the be all and end all, but you're better. I always used to say, because when I do execution, I work on the three things as well. focused execution.
Yeah.
And I let the team, the sales management team, come up with those three things because then they own them.
Yes.
It's not
Yes.
Steven saying it. So there are ways to get them to own some of these things, and usually they're pretty much on track if you open it up.
But and as your role as an executive coach and as a facilitator, no doubt, based on your experience and the research you've done and your knowledge, you know essentially what some of those things are going to be that's going to drive the needle. So you'd be influencing them, but doing it in such a way that they own it, that they come up with it, but then you'd be holding them to account
Yes.
through the discipline around implementation over a period of time.
And I'll work with them for a period of time, usually 6 months,
Yeah,
to help them implement. But what I've realized is that is good. That moves the needle. But what really helps move the needle is the next level, pushing it as well, or
yeah.
supporting it, or that word enforcing it is key. And not to say my next book may have that word in it, but anyways, I tease my wife that this is part of a trilogy, but she laughs at me and she laughs, and but I'm serious. So
Well, just on that, the enforcer part, I just wanted to chat to you a little bit about
yes,
this. In that, what I see in a lot of organizations is they'll bring people like us in to do coaching or do some training, help with development of the sales team or the sales organization, right? And often in those, and I get this all the time, I'll get a sales manager or a key account director in a training session say, "Hey, Darren, is our senior leaders doing this particular program?" And obvious, and I've got to think very carefully as to how I phrase that and how I respond to that. But here's the reality that I'm finding: a lot of the senior leaders are bringing in people like us to do training, to do coaching, to try to move the needle, and they're not involved at all, right?
yeah,
They're
yeah.
saying, have we ticked the box? Have we done the training? Is the training been successful? Have we got the return on investment? What you're saying is, as part of this ecosystem, there's a number of parts to this. You've got to make sure that we've got the coaching, the discipline, the spine that's been set up. You've also got to make sure that the one up and the two up and ultimately the three up, depending on the size of the organization, are all engaged and committed to the outcome, which means the CRO, for example, needs to know what their responsibilities are and they need to be committed to the journey.
You know what? I couldn't have said it better myself, Darren. Uh, so it's not an easy task. I used to have a client, and it was a good friend of mine, and he'd say, Stephen, I don't know why you get upset with things, because where there's dysfunction, there's business. It dawned on me, you're right, because I see dysfunction in organizations, but I said, I'm here to make it work.
Yeah,
So how it's funny because I wasn't a trainer. I wasn't a facilitator. I was a VP of sales, and I
yeah.
took that very seriously. And always my thought is, how do we implement this? How do we execute? And that's always how I've run my business. So I don't feel that I'm like the most strategic person in the world, but when it comes to execution,
Mm,
I don't want to say I'm brilliant, but I'm pretty sharp on execution. And that's where I spend my time. And I remember I hired someone from a competitor, and they said to me, Stephen, we have the same strategies that you have.
yeah,
Difference is who's going to execute it better.
yeah,
And that stuck with me for, 25 years because
yeah.
it's true.
Mm,
Some people, and not to pick on marketing people, because I was a VP of marketing at one point, they're very good at the strategies. But if you don't execute, and that's what the Salesforce's job is to execute, the VP of sales is to make sure they implement. And you just remind me of, if I can share another story with you. I've only worked for two leading companies in my days. And when I went to my second company, they had a wonderful trainer there. And he said, Stephen, we're looking at a new sales model. I said, okay. I said, I don't care which one you choose.
yep,
Just know that we're not going to change it. So, they're all the same.
yeah,
It's really the best selling model is the one your sales reps know,
yep,
understand, and use.
yeah.
Uh, if you told me spin selling was better than what's the book I have?
Challenger style.
Challenger sale. That was what I was looking for. I was looking for a red book. So you tell me one's better than the other. It's like, no, it's what you're able to effectively implement as a sales organization is what's going to, that's just my simple view of the world. And I try to put things down to very simple terms. So
Well,
for,
I love that because and the great thing about this conversation is it's reinforced for me the fact that we can't overcomplicate things, and the smaller number of things you can get teams to focus on, leadership to focus on, the better. And I love the fact you've got three key things that form that spine. One is the coaching, one is the inspection around the performance, the accountability, making sure we're doing the right things that'll move the needle, but also the execution with excellence. And that is, and you're saying just then, whatever the sales methodology is because I'll go into organizations and I say, I don't care what sales methodology you use.
right. Yeah.
But I'm going to help you execute with excellence whatever is the sales methodology you have, because it ain't the sales methodology that's going to make the difference.
Right. And not to pick on new VPs of sales. Everyone wants to put in a leadership role, they want to imprint and put their stamp on the organization.
Yeah,
But you know, I'm sure it's not much different in Australia or you know in Asia that CROs have very short lifespans with organizations.
yeah,
They tend to move every 18 months or two
yeah,
years.
yeah,
I stayed with the company for 10 years my first time, and then
yeah,
3 years my second time. And I always wonder how in 18 months can you implement something that you want to do? It's transactional.
totally.
And you know the reality is they make more money because they go to a higher company. But when do you actually know if the stuff that you've worked on
Mm,
works?
mm. And again, you mentioned discipline. I talk about patience, but I also talk to sales leaders all the time about you've got to have patience, but you've got to have a sense of urgency at the same time. Which
Yes,
sounds
yes, yes.
counterintuitive, but what I'm trying to tell them and instill upon them is you've got to look at the things that you've been talking about, and that is what are the key disciplines that we know will actually drive the needle of behavior, which will underpin performance.
Yes,
Because
sir.
it's all about sustainable performance. And when you've got that, I think that you're going to start to see more CROs, more VP of sales, more people having longer tenures because they're having bigger impact on the organization.
Mm, interesting. But again, I wrote an article on that because I was, you know, one of the things I was at the time, I always sort of write articles of what's troubling me at the time and try to think of a solution.
Mm,
Uh, and the average tenure was very short. Now, a lot of this has to do with SaaS, where pharma, I come from the pharma world,
yeah.
uh, you know, they're more mature companies. People, you know, I see people with 25 years in their role or with the company. In technology, things move very quickly.
Mm,
And sometimes that's what the problem is because no one has the patience to see something to fruition. I had someone who used to tell me, this was one of my sales leaders, and our boss, who was president, he'd say, you know, the one thing with Michelle is you plant a seed,
yeah.
and every day Michelle would dig it up to see why it's not growing. So I had to manage Michelle, and I did a pretty good job because I talk about a small portion in the book about you know managing upwards, but that's part of the problem that we face, right? That's the patience
Well,
issue. That you know
well, it is.
you know you plant the seed, you're working on something, but you can't be checking every day why it's not growing.
No. But that's the cultural thing as well, isn't it? And you talk about when the pressure rises, the standards start to soften. And
Yes.
because we don't have leaders that can see or understand the strategy, understand the end game, they don't have the understanding that they've got to nurture things because every seed has an incubation period, just like every deal has an incubation period, every customer, every opportunity has
You
an
got it.
incubation period.
You got to
Oh,
water it, you got to nurture it, you got to fertilize it, you got to talk to it. You know, so patience, discipline. You know, if you're managing for the short term, you're going to get short-term results.
you will.
If you're
You
managing
will.
for the long term, hopefully you're going to get scalable,
Mm,
predictable results.
yeah. And that's it's a great way to sort of wrap the podcast up, because when you're thinking about big organizations, and particularly the big B2B, they make decisions and strategies. And I know the timeline has changed, because 5, 10 years ago, long-term planning might have been 5 to 10 years. In the world of AI, long-term planning for some organizations is 12 months, right? But they have the
Yes.
foresight to look at what's the end game, where are we trying to head to, and we know there's a number of steps, and we've got to have the right people in the right roles with the right disciplines, focus on the right things to get the right outcome. And it's the leaders that can do that will ultimately reap the benefits.
And my nuance here is, in most cases, it's not the talent.
Yeah,
In most cases, it's the system.
yeah,
The system is not helping those people do their jobs well.
yeah.
And that's kind of the wake up call, the punch in the face that I want to uh, give these sales leaders, saying, hey, we need to change how what we do, how we do it. We know it has to be done,
Mm,
but it's not aligned to what we actually do on a daily basis.
yeah. So I love that. We could go and talk another couple of hours on this, but we'll leave it
I'm
there, because I
good,
know
I'm
I'm conscious
enjoying
of
this.
time. I'm conscious of time. But as you were saying that, I was just thinking, and we'll wrap it up with this. That you think about a lot of professional sports organizations, American football, soccer,
Yeah,
and so forth, and a lot of sales leaders look for, oh, we've got to change, we've got to bring new talent in, right? And they don't look at the game plan, they don't look at the system they use, because
right.
and I don't want people to misconstrue this. You've got to have people of talent, right? But if they don't have a system that is consistent, that can be replicable and sustainable, no amount of
Ah,
talent is going to get the result.
and with organizations that are growing quickly, you're looking for scalability.
Mm,
Right? And I think that's where, uh, companies have grown, SaaS companies, technology has taken off. Companies, NVIDIA, I think I don't know if they doubled their sales or they did some mega amount of sales in the last quarter.
mm,
And how do you sustain that? They've been able to for, a period of time, but the challenge is, how do you scale if your system
yeah,
sucks?
yeah, that's it.
And you may have the talent.
Yeah,
So the first thing that the CRO thinks, or and I've been, head of sales, is, oh, we don't have the right people in place. Well, I don't know. We don't know
mm,
that yet.
mm. Look at the system.
Yeah.
Look at the system. So, Stephen, it's been a great conversation. I know it's nearly your dinner time now in in Toronto. So, for people who have been listening to this and would like to know more about you, being able to connect with you, but also get a copy of the book, where's the best place for them to go?
Best place, and I looked to make sure I'm listed on Amazon .com.au. Uh, so it is definitely listed there, so you can easily get a copy. It's in ebook format or Kindle, as well
Hmm.
as paperback. And I'm just working on the audio version for people who like to listen.
Nice.
Uh, my company's called Star Results. And you can find me, I think you use www.starresults.com. And I guess for larger organizations that, are looking to spread this across their sales management team, if you go to my book page, we have bulk orders and some serious discounts and some value adds for companies that want to adopt this as part of their operating system.
Nice. And I'll also throw in that you're on LinkedIn as well. So if people want to connect
Oh
with you
yeah, yeah,
directly.
yeah. I spend probably you're on LinkedIn more than I am. I was looking, but yes, that's the only social media I use. And just joking aside, I asked both my kids that are business people. I said, "Can you go on LinkedIn and like some of my stuff now that I launched the book?" Oh, Dad, I hate LinkedIn. I'm thinking that's where it all happens. That's the only place I spend time. But different generations.
Totally. Maybe you'll have to do some TikToks.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I may just get there and do more speaking because I think I feel like I'm onto something that maybe awakes something different in, again, it's not about motivation or
Yeah.
inspiration, even though I believe in those things. It's really about creating an operating system to help managers be more effective.
Nice, nice. Well, with that said, I'll put all of that in the show notes. Stephen, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. We've been
Darren,
connected on LinkedIn for a while now, but it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast, and thanks for a great conversation.
and I appreciate it. Great questions and engaging conversation. So I appreciate you and uh, look forward to working together in the future.
Perfect. Thanks, Stephen. All the best.
Okay, all the best, Darren.
Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.